We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Aleph and Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesuvos Daf 60a. The Mishnah said that let's say you have a situation where the baby recognizes the mother, so then we can compel the mother to nurse the child. And the Gemara says, Ad Kama, how old of a child is it that recognizes his mother? Rashi over here says, Ad Kama Chodoshim Islan L'Meimer Sheyodei L'Hakira Milinek Meisho Acheres. Until again, how many months old do we say that the child recognizes his mother, that now he's not going to want to nurse from another mother? And the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav. Rava says that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says that Rav says, Shlosha Chodoshim, the amount of time is 3 months. A 3-month-old baby recognizes his mother. Ushmuel Amar Shloshim Yom, and Shmuel says 30 days. Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav Yochanan, and Rav Yitzchak says that Rav Yochanan says Chamishim Yom, it's 50 days. Amar Rav Shimi bar Abaya, Rav Shimi bar Abaya says Halacha, Rav Yitzchak, the Halacha is like Rav Yitzchak, Shamar Misham Rav Yochanan, who said in the name of Rav Yochanan, he said that Rav Yochanan said that it is 50 days, that is the Halacha. And the Gemara now says, B'shalama Rav Rav Yochanan, I understand the opinion of Rav and the opinion of Rav Yochanan, whether it's 3 months or 50 days, Kol Chad V'Chad Kichur, for every child is like his own sharpness. Each child is going to be aware of his mother at different points in time, depending on the aptitude of the child. As Rashi over here says, Kol Chad L'fam Churfa Yeshtino Charuf Makir V'Chamishim Yom, some are sharp and they recognize the mother in 50 days, V'Yesheno Makir Shlosha Chadoshim, some of them it's going to take 3 months, that makes sense. Ela l'Shmuel ki agavna mimashkachas la, but according to Shmuel, do you really have such a situation? In 30 days, he recognizes his mother. And the Gemara says, Ki asa Rami bar Yecheskel Amar, when Rami bar Yecheskel came, so he said, Lo sitzitzinu lahani chlali, don't listen to these rules. The Chayil Yehuda achi mishmei de Shmuel, that my brother Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, don't listen to those rules. Rather, it works as follows, Hachi Amar Shmuel, this is really what Shmuel said, Kol zman shemakir, it just goes any time, there's no real way of measuring, you have to tell, by every child it's going to be different. You have to examine the situation. Rashi over here says, "Kozman shemakira ain't shir l'davar." There is no shir for this. Ela b'bdiko hadavar talo. It's talo. You have to do an investigation. Imanu rom shemakira kofa minikto b'schar v'afilu gershel. If we see that he recognizes the mother, so then we force her to nurse him. And again, in a situation where let's say they are divorced, so she'll nurse him and she'll get paid for nursing him. But we are going to compel her to nurse him in such a situation. And the Gemara continues, Zahida Asoy L'Kamei de Shmuel, there was a woman who came before Shmuel, Amar Leiler Rav Dimi bar Yosef. So Shmuel said to Rav Dimi bar Yosef, Zil Bodka, go and examine and see if the child recognizes her. Azal Osve Bidare Danashi, so he went and he put her among a row of other women. Beshakli Livron, he took her son V'Kamahadr Le'alayu, and he took the child by each woman. Kimot Lagaba, when he came to her, when he came to the mother, Havakamazve Liape, so he was looking, he was turning his face toward her. So it was clear that he recognized his mother. And so the Gemara says, Kivashtinhi la'ena mine. So then the mother, she kind of hid her eyes from the child. Amar lo, so he said to him, meaning to say, Rav Dimi bar Yosef said to the mother, Netaf einach, you have to straighten up your eyes, don't look away. Kum dari brich, go, and you should take your son. In other words, you should go ahead and you have to nurse your son. And the Gemara says, Suma min yada, what about a blind child? How is he going to know who his mother is? And to that the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, Berechu v'taima, he can know based on the smell, based on the taste. There are ways of him identifying who his mother is. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, this is a Tosefta, Yonek Tinok V'holech, Ad Esrim V'yarbo Chodesh, a child is allowed to nurse until 24 months old. Mikan V'elech Kionek Sheketz, but if the child nurses beyond 24 months old, that's like nursing from a non-kosher animal. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, that's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So the limit is until 24 months for a child to nurse, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, Afilu Arba V'chomesh Shanim, a child can nurse even 4 years old, 5 years old, that's fine. It's not a problem. But Piresh Lachar Esrim V'Arba Chodesh, but let's say the child is weaned after 24 months, he stops nursing. V'chazer, and then he goes back and starts nursing again, that's already Kiyonek Sheketz. That's already like nursing from a non-kosher animal, that would be a problem. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, Mikan va'elech kiyonek sheketz, like we just said above, from beyond 24 months, that's like nursing from a non-kosher animal. And the Gemara says, Uramini, we have the following contradiction. It says, Yachol yehei cholav mahalchei shtayim tameh. I might think the milk of humans, meaning those who walk on 2 legs, I might think that milk is not kosher. Vidino, and we can make the following kal v'chomer. Uma behema she'ikalta b'magaf. When it comes to an animal, by an animal we're lenient if an animal touches, let's say an animal is alive and touches a person, it's not going to cause any tumah. An animal only causes tumah after it dies. But when it comes to an animal, we're strict when it comes to the milk of an animal. The milk of an animal, let's say it's a non-kosher animal, is going to be not kosher. So when it comes to a human, we're strict when it comes to the touch of a human. A human is able to make another person tameh even when he's alive in certain situations. So eino din shetachmer b'chelbo, certainly we should be machmir when it comes to the milk of a human, that would be considered to be tameh, would be considered not kosher. And to that the Brisa says, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, es hagomol ki mala geirahu, talks about the fact that the camel is mala geira and therefore it's not kosher. And we understand the following, hu tameh, meaning it, the word hu says, it, the gomol is tameh, it's not kosher. V'ein chola mahal cheshtayim tameh, but the milk that comes from humans is not considered tameh, it is kosher. Elatar, rather it is pure, rather it is kosher. And so therefore the Brisa is saying that the milk of people is actually kosher. And the Gemara says, so I might think that I exclude milk because milk is not shava bakol, meaning to say that only women produce milk and not men. But I shouldn't exclude the blood, shu shava bakol, because that's something that comes from everyone. Talmud Lomar, so the pasuk says who, it says again, the pasuk says who tameh ve'ein dam mahal cheshtayim tameh. It is tameh, it is considered not kosher, but the blood of people also, that's not going to be tameh, it's not kosher. Elatar, rather the blood of humans is also kosher. V'yomer Rav Sheshes, and Rav Sheshes said, "Afilu mitzvahs prisha ein bo." When it says in this brisa that the milk is going to be kosher, you don't even have a d'Rabbanan to separate from it. There's no need at all to separate from this milk, and so it seems that the milk is completely kosher. And yet we're saying over here, no, the milk is a problem for any child more than 24 months old. That milk is going to be a problem. And to that the Gemara answers, lo kash, it's not difficult. Had de parish, had de lo parish. It depends if the milk has separated from its source or if it has not separated from its source. Meaning to say, if you have a situation where you're nursing from the breast of the mother, so that's already going to be a problem if the child is more than 24 months old. But if you're talking about milk that's already been separated, we're not talking about nursing directly from the mother, so then there's no problem whatsoever, and that's what the Brisa was referring to. And the Gemara notes, v'chilufa bedam, that the opposite is true by blood. When it comes to the milk, so it's actually worse when it's directly from the source, but when it's separated from the source, it's better. But when it comes to the blood, it's the exact opposite. When it's separated from the source, that's when it's more problematic. Kedetanya, as we learned in a Brisa, dam shal gabe kikor, if you have blood that's on top of a loaf of bread, gorero v'ochel, you have to scrape it off and eat the bread. Shebein hashinayim, but if it's between the teeth, motzitzo v'eno choshesh, he's allowed to suck it, he can swallow it, and it's not a problem. Since it hasn't separated, it's not going to be a problem. And Rashi over here explains, first, Adam shechmarta b'mago, it says by people we're more strict when a person touches, meaning even when the person is alive, they can convey tumah, and that refers to a nida. For example, a nida can be metame, even though of course she is alive. And Rashi over here continues, ein bo d'mido raisa shari. The point is you don't have to separate it all from milk. Milk that comes from humans is totally mutter mido raisa. For Rabbanan nami lo gazer bein, even the Rabbanan didn't make any gezerah. The amrin on cholam mal cheshtayim tar. That's the idea. The milk that comes from humans is totally tar. And then the Gemara made a distinction, had de parish, when it separates from the source, so then it's going to be kosher. Had de katani mutter keshapirish midode ho'isha lekli. If it went from the breasts of the woman to a vessel, so then it's mutter completely. V'hayonek min hadad ki yonek sheketz midrabanan. But somebody who nurses from the breast, and again is not the appropriate age, that's already asur midrabanan. And then the Gemara said, v'chilufa b'dam, it's the opposite by blood, the midaparish asur midrabanan. When it separates from its source, that's when it's asur midrabanan, talking about from the human source. The michlaf b'dam behema, because then people will get confused with the blood of an animal, which is a problem. V'asur l'meimar dam behema, people will think the person is having dam behema, but when it's between the teeth, it's still going to be okay. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, Rabbi Yoshua says, Afilu arba v'chamesh shanim, even a child that's 4 or 5 years old is still allowed to nurse. And the Gemara asks for Tanya, but we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yoshua says, Afilu chavilaso al kseifav, that even when he's able to carry a burden on his shoulders, he can still be nursing. Seems to be a different age than 4 or 5. And the Gemara answers, no, idi vidi chad shiuruhu, that's actually the same exact shir. 4 or 5 years old is the same shir as chavilaso al kseifav. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef, halachic Rav Yoshua. Rav Yosef says the halacha follows Rav Yoshua. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Marino says, Goneach yonek cholav b'Shabbos. Let's say you have somebody who's coughing and needs milk. He's allowed to nurse milk from an animal even on Shabbos. And the Gemara explains, my time, what's the reason? Yonek mefarik elachar yad. If somebody's sucking the milk directly from the animal, that is only mefarik with a shinoi. It's considered kelachar yad. It's not the normal way of mefarik. Over makom tzara lo gazer rabbanan. And here you have a situation of pain, and therefore the rabbanan did not make a gezerah. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, halacha ke Rabbi Marinos. The halacha is like Rabbi Marinos. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Nachem Ishgalya Omer, Nachem Ishgalya says, Tzinor she'alubo kaskasen. Let's say you have a situation of a pipe, and there are weeds in the pipe that are blocking up the pipe. Memachon baraglo betzina b'Shabbos. So privately a person can crush them with his foot on Shabbos. V'yeino choshesh, and it's not a problem. My time, what's the reason? Mesakin kalachar yadu. He's fixing the pipe, but again, he's doing it with a shinoi. He's doing it in an abnormal fashion. Uvamakom pseidel lo gazer bar rabbanan. And here's a situation of a potential loss of money, and therefore the rabbanan did not make a gezerah. Amar Rav Yosef says, halacha kanochem ishgalya. The halacha is like this. The halacha is like nochem ishgalya. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Piresh liachar esrim v'arba chodesh v'chazar kiyonek sheketz. Let's say you have a situation where the child was weaned after 24 months, and then he goes and starts nursing again. So that's already kiyonek sheketz. That's already like nursing from a non-kosher animal. And the Gemara says, v'kama. So how much is considered being weaned? How much does the child have to not nurse for? How long in order so that he's not allowed to go back and nurse again? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva says that Shmuel says, Shlosha Yomim, it is 3 days. Ika diamri, some of the version as follows, Tani Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva kame de Shmuel, that Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva in front of Shmuel taught in a brayso as follows, Shlosha Yomim, that again 3 days, if he's weaned for 3 days, then he's not allowed to go back at that point in time and nurse further. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Meinekes shemes bala. Let's say you have a woman who is nursing and her husband dies. So besoch esrim v'arba chodesh, if it's within 24 months from when the child was born, harezu lo tesares v'lo tinase. She should not be betrothed and she should not get married at that point in time. The reason over here is that if she gets married within the 24 months, and let's say she becomes pregnant, she won't be able to nurse that first child, and there's no father of that first child to take care of that child, and so therefore that could be problematic, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Amud Beis.